Ryan here with Dark Rangers Inc. and we're doing our first processing workflow of 2025. And I know it's a little bit late in the year, but typically I do an update when there is some new technique or a new way that my workflow goes from start to finish. And really, I haven't done a lot different in the last year or two. And so what I did is I reached out to my Patreon group. I asked, hey, is there anything you guys want me to focus on in Pixinsight? And we didn't really get anything new. We really had a conversation about being brilliant at the basics. So having a really good understanding of the core principles that makes image processing successful. So while I haven't added a lot of new software in terms of maybe a new noise removal or gradient extraction, the things that are, tend to be fads within the processing realm that really swap out and are constantly evolving, it has been a little bit more quiet on that front. And I think it's because people realize that they've gotten really good. AI's been introduced, but it's up to us to get really good at doing those big things like stacking it correctly, getting a good stretch, understanding color theory, and getting the best mix of color in your image, and putting it all together with strong data to get an awesome final image. Speaking of data, we're going to be going to Telescope Live and using their LRGB data that you see to use the thumbnail image of the Shark Nebula. I've been using Telescope Live for several years, and it was one of the first partners of the channel, but it's also when I was really working on improving my processing and putting out a lot of processing content, I wasn't getting enough data to keep up with the amount of practice that I wanted to have, so that Telescope Live really helps supplement that. And they've done an awesome thing. You get 50% off using this discount code, and so that way you can go and try it at a very low cost. So if you're following along and you have a one-shot color camera, this would be really similar to using it with no filter on after I combine the LRGB data. I haven't really done a lot of LRGB workflows, and I do have something that I do that's a little bit different now for the stars to really maximize the color. It's nothing revolutionary, but it is a nice tip, and I think you guys will appreciate it. So this will probably be a long one. Let's jump right into getting the data, and then we'll go into the actual processing itself. And then this one's going to be 20 credits. Now I have 210, and it's 40 hours of data. And I believe this is from a Bortle 2. So this is going to be data that most of you guys are not going to be able to access unless you go ahead and take a dark sky trip. So I'm going to download, and we'll go ahead and come back obviously once that's downloaded. All right, once the data is downloaded, and again, I would do it before you have to run an errand or go to the gym or maybe before you go to bed. It doesn't take terribly long, but probably about a half hour, 45 minutes in this case. I'm going to open up Pixinsight and go to batch processing and then weighted batch pre-processing. We're going to go through this really quick, so don't skip ahead if you already know this or you don't need to. And then I've already loaded all the lights, but the way you do that is just go to lights, and then it says full data set. I'm just going to select all of these, and because they're calibrated, I don't need to do flats, darks, bias, etc. I'm going to go ahead and check all of these. Asymmetric solution is really important for SPCC. All of these are just going to help give you a little bit better image, so it's up to you if you want to select them. It's going to add time though, so if you're in a hurry, you can get rid of some of these, but it's ultimately going to give you a better overall image. In post calibration, I would recommend doing a 2x drizzle. So enable 2x, apply to all. For the sake of saving space on my hard drive, because these are full frame images, I am going to not drizzle just for demonstration purposes, but this was shot at 530 millimeters. I'm not going to get into all the science behind drizzle, but I would really suggest that you do a 2x drizzle for best stars. You're going to choose your folder. I already created one for the Shark Nebula, and then you're going to go ahead and click run. So we're going to let this go, and then we'll come back and edit the image. All right, once the stacking's done, we're going to go ahead and open up the master light files. And then I'm just going to go to window, tile windows. So they're all 4. And then I'm just going to hover over and scroll to size it. We can just take a look at each one if we want. I'm just clicking and then hitting this little nuclear button up here to do an STF. And then I am just going to right click and change the identifier to R, L, and then G and B. So this little tab here, right click, identifier, and that's blue. And this one says green. Oop. So If you're in one-shot color, once we combine these images, we'll be pretty much in the same spot. So I'm going to go ahead and set these aside because we really don't need them open to work with them, and they just kind of take up a lot of space. So normally I have all the icons that I use for my image processing over here on the right, but I'm just going to show you guys how I get to them. So process, all process, and then we're going to go for LRGB combination. And then what I can do is just hit that little square there, or you can go ahead and drag and drop. So I can drag that R into R, or if it's easier for you to just select it in here by clicking that little guy. And now I have my LRGB in the LRGB. So one thing that you can do, if you want, is I can unselect the luminance and I can hit the circle to just combine the RGB. One thing luminance does is it really does drown out the color. So if we just show you guys this, I am going to go ahead and just quickly hit it with a screen transfer unlinked. So screen transfer function is what it does kind of a stretch for us. If I unlink it, it will give us a more balanced stretch. And you can see all those nice star colors that we have, the blues, the oranges, and whatnot. If we do the luminance channel, especially if we leave it at 100%, and we combine it, you'll see very quickly that that luminance does a great job cleaning up noise, enhancing the structure of the nebula, but wah, wah, there goes our star color. Now we can run SPCC and saturate the daylights out of it and try to bring that back. You could also just run SPCC on this, do your blur extermination if you wanted to shrink the stars down, whatever, and set these aside and then work with the LRGB image so you do get the benefits of the luminance channel, which is the dark nebula enhancement and the noise reduction. I'm just going to go ahead and run Star Exterminator. We are going to be running the RC Astro strips, so if you don't have RC Astro, you could run, the StarNet, and I'm just going to take these stars now. If you really wanted to go crazy with it, I'd run SPCC and get these perfectly correct. I did just for fun process this image ahead of time. It makes very little difference. These orange stars stay orange, the blue ones stay blue, and so on. So you can see, we do have some gradient issues, a little bit of a light leak issue in there, it looks like, but we'll go ahead and throw that out. Again, if you wanted to do it perfect, run SPCC, which is just under well, we're going to run through it with the full image. So just do what we do here with that image. And the one thing you could do to kind of minimize that is we can take this luminance channel and maybe drop it down to, well, like somewhere in the 40 and 50% range. And then if I do drag the saturation slider to the left a little bit, it's still going to look really washed out with the color, but we don't really need 100% strength necessarily. I'm going to go ahead and unlink stretch this. And there you go. Now, if we do link it, the green channel always tends to win. So we are going to need to color correct this. And the first thing that I'm going to do, this was auto cropped. So if you didn't crop it already, you'd want to do a dynamic crop, which is just process dynamic crop, but we did choose auto crop. And then I would just hit this little guy in the bottom corner and then just get rid of the stacking artifacts. Usually they're right around the outside, just kind of drag in on all four sides. And then I would just execute, but this was already good to go. So I'm just going to close that out and minimize this for now. Do have Star Exterminator open still because we're going to use that again. So I'm going to go ahead and run the gradient correction. We can leave it in the link stretch just to see how it does. These are the stock settings. I'm going to click on automatic convergence and generate gradient model. I'm going to bump up the scale a little bit and the smoothness because I don't want it to attack these little minute delicate areas of the dark nebula. You could probably leave it in stock and it'd probably run fine, but if it's really chunky gradient where there's little blotchy issues all over the place, you want to leave the scale and the smoothness low. But if it is kind of a general gradient, we can bump up the smoothness and that will kind of protect the subtle dark nebula areas. And then I do check to generate gradient model. so that we can see what it removed. And so let's do a non-link stretch. And you can see there was some magenta and some green and things like that. And if we unlink stretch this, you can kind of see that that's now been removed. If I go back, there's some magenta here, kind of forest green. It's more of like a green yellow up here. And then you can kind of see those same things come out there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go to process, and then we're going to go to blur exterminator. And I'm going to do just a correct only feature and get this ready for SPCC. And that's going to be our color calibration. And I'm also going to have it do a background neutralization and get rid of that ugly green cast that we see. We need it so that when, and I'm going to shrink this and this because we're going to use the full version later. We need it so that when we do a link stretch, it looks like that and not this green, because ultimately what we're going to do is we're going to do GHS, which is a link stretch, and so is histogram transformation. So we need it to not look like that. So next we're going to run SPCC. So process, color calibration, spectrophotometric, and I'm going to grab this little paper icon here. I think that's what it is. I don't know. And I'm just going to draw a little preview, kind of not going into any of the stars or the dark nebula. And I'm going to choose that as a region of interest. I'm going to have background neutralization on, and this will help get rid of that green cast. And then we've just got RGB because that's what we have. I'm just going to leave it pretty standard. I'm going to go ahead and apply this. Okay, here we go. I'm going to close that out. And now let's see if we can just do a regular screen transfer function. And good, now the green's gone. Let's just make sure that it's not still. So now you can see we can go back to linked screen transfer function, and now the green is gone. Hooray. And it's technically color corrected. Now, as you can see, there's not a lot of color, but the color is corrected per the Gaia database, and we'll have to bring a lot of that back. So now what we can do is we can run the full blur exterminator. We're not going to use these stars. So really what I'm looking to do is just sharpen the non-stellar stuff. So we'll go ahead and run that. Okay, so that kind of helps define, if we go before, just some of the nebulosity a little bit. Doesn't do a huge on the dark nebula, but just the process that I usually do. So I must have accidentally closed Star Exterminator. You can use StarNet if you don't have the RC Astro. So now we've corrected the gradient, we've color corrected it, we've sharpened up the nebulosity with Blur Exterminator, which if you don't have that, it is optional, you're fine. And we're gonna get rid of these stars, but look at how much more color these stars have. Don't accidentally erase those. So we're gonna get rid of those. And now we have our image. And you can see it doesn't have as many of the issues that the one did with without the L version. So really at this point, I would run some noise exterminator. After we run the star exterminator, we'll do noise. It's not too bad, and that's really why the generic settings is 90. I almost never run it that high. We can probably run to 50. It is actually pretty smooth with the luminance channel added. Just the RGB was pretty noisy when I looked at it. And we'll go ahead and run it on 0.5, and then we'll be ready to stretch it. There we go. There are some issues like up here. I would correct these in Photoshop after I stretch it. I do have a full tutorial on Photoshop. It is my only paid content. It's on the Patreon website. It's in the description somewhere. And I believe it's $29.99. It's a full hour. I take 10 years of my experience, and really it's about what I don't include that I think makes it valuable, because you can go totally crazy trying to learn Photoshop, and so trying to just give you everything that's useful for Astro. But there is one thing that I didn't cover, and I can show you that really quick. So I'm hitting command kind of over here, close to it, in a similar type of environment. So I don't want to like click over here, for example, and clone that over. I want to clone here, and then I'm just going to give it a couple clicks. If you're like, oh man, that's kind of harsh, let's bump up the softness. And there we go. We got rid of that. I mean, it does hurt. And then I think there was another light leak when I looked at it earlier over here. Does it hurt the perfect accuracy of the dust nebula? Yes. Do you want a light leak in your image? No. And then we have this kind of weird thing over here. It's up to you guys. If your data has this, it's really up to you what you want to do. This is a big one from the actual star. I'm not as concerned with that as this like bar. I mean, that just looks very unnatural. Oop, one click too many. Like that, I just don't want, but I do want to make sure that I don't touch this, and then you don't, I really try to avoid any borderline detail like that, because that's really going to make it incorrect. But if we go to this double left arrow, you can see line, light leak, and then that bar. And if we go to the right, we've kind of removed it. I did have one, yeah, I don't want that last one. And then now I'm going to apply it by hitting the check mark. Okay, so we're ready to go ahead and stretch this. I'm going to go into process, all process, GHS. Now, I do have several videos just on GHS, and one of them is one of my most watched processing tutorials, but it was when I first learned it, and I think I've gotten better at teaching it. So basically what I do is you have to pick a symmetry point, and the symmetry point is the focal point of the stretch, and you can intensify that with the local intensity. So what I basically do is figure just go from dark to light with the symmetry points. The darker you pick for the symmetry point, the more your stretch will brighten the image. The brighter the spot, like if I pick this and I stretch, the symmetry point will be way over here, and it'll push the data back over in this direction to the dark area. So the image is going to get brighter, brighter, brighter. And then as I start picking bright points, it'll get darker and darker and darker because it's going to look kind of blown out for a second. So I'm going to pick a really dark area. I'm just going to left click right in there, send to SP, turn off the screen transfer function, turn on the preview. And basically, I want to get the data right to this first quartile with the stretch factor. Boom, boom, boom. There we go. And then see how narrow that is? I'm going to use this local intensity. Now it's like about 4 times as wide, and we have some more data to work with. I'm going to apply that, reset. And then, like I said, there was some nebula kind of over here that was not black, but really dark. You can see where it put the arrow or the line kind of right in the middle. If it was a little to the left or a little to the right, that's fine, but I'm just gonna, and you're gonna see the image is just gonna continue to get kind of brighter. Where you put that symmetry point is where the stretch is really gonna focus on that level of brightness. So I wanna do this in a bunch of small steps. So I'm going like 0.6, 0.7, somewhere in there. And then if you want to protect the highlights, you can with this, and you can protect the shadows there. So I'm going to apply that. Now I know, and just to show you what I was talking about, I'm not going to do this yet, but if I go to the bright one and choose that as a symmetry point, when I stretch it, it's going to make it darker. So I know that eventually this image looks blown out. It's going to get darker as I pick brighter points. If it's hard for you to visualize that, go to linear and then just get the dark point closer to where you would want it. And then that might make it easier for you to kind of work with. So now I'm going to go to like kind of a medium dark area of nebulosity, like right there. I'm going to send that to symmetry. I'm going to hit it with a little stretch and then a little local intensity. And you can see that area now where I clicked is really coming out. Okay. I'll pick an even brighter area, like say up here. Send that to SP. Okay. And then let's go up here in this detailed area there. I want to really start to bring that out. There we go. Now we're getting it to pop. Okay. And then let's go to probably the lightest gray. You can also look, this is pretty smooth. There's a little bit of a kind of a kink right in there. I can put the stretch there and kind of smooth that out. Usually that's a nice area of contrast it'll bring out. And then let's go to that really bright area out here. And now you'll see it should really start to darken the image, but also bring out the contrast in that bright area. So there, now you see we're getting our contrast back. So if you're like, oh man, it was looking really washed out, what are you doing? And then what you can do is go back to linear. You can get a little bit more out by dragging the white point up and then the black point down. You can see it does say we're starting to clip. We'll leave that. And then I always just do one final where I don't pick the symmetry point by clicking. I just give it a little stretch, maybe 0.4, 0.5, a little local intensity, and then I just drag the symmetry point. And that's maybe just a little more. I'm going to leave the background lighter than I probably normally would because I want to keep this nebulosity back there. And that might just be a little more stretch than I needed. So there's the before, and then there's kind of the final stretch just to make it really pop. And you can see if I applied it one more time, maybe I could pull it back a hair, and sure, we'll apply it one more time. Now, an easy way to add some color is we could add some saturation at this point if we wanted. And you can see it's bringing, there we go. We can also do that with some curves at the end. I'm gonna try to do a little blue. Now you can see it's everywhere. I can use the symmetry point to get it out of the background, but keep it in the areas I want. So it's in the higher, it's in the brighter areas, but not so much in the background. So there we go. All right, call it stretched. So what we could do now, if we wanted to maybe enhance the nebulosity, we could go to local histogram equalization, turn on the preview. And as you can see, it looks ridiculous. And people do overdo this, just like in Photoshop, they overdo many of the things as well. I'm going to drop the amount from 1.0 maybe to like 0.5, which is still more than we're going to use, but I want to see the kernel size, the kernel radius, and that's going to affect how it's applied. So if we go small, it's going to go after all the little details, and if we go big, it's going to highlight the big overarching structure. So there's really no right way to do this. It's just kind of to taste. I find anywhere between like 60 and probably 200 ends up being pretty good. Just depends on what you want to bring out. Do I want to bring out all the fine details, or do I really just want to make the overall structure pop from the background? So let's go ahead and drop that down to call it 0.2. Less is more. Boom. And as you can see, you can maybe bump up the contrast one before, after. We'll go 0.22. There we go. Now we've really made that nebulosity kind of pop out of the background. Okay. So a quick way to do the stars so that they have a nice glow is really, I find, to do kind of like a mid-tone stretch. I go to histogram transformation, turn off the STF, and what we're going to do is grab this mid-tones caret right here. So you have your dark area, your highlight, mid-tone, and I'm just going to give this nice kind of stretch that we have here. I'm going to turn on the preview. I always just kind of have it go a little bit below this corner here. So that's where I look for. I'm going to apply it once, twice, and now the preview's on. So the preview's showing it as though I've applied it again. I am going to apply it again. And now that's probably a little too much for me. But remember, the preview's on. So now I can fine tune it. So I'll grab that middle caret and maybe I will just pull it back a hair. And when you get to the spot you like, okay, so now we have our image and our stars. I use this old utility script called screen stars, and we'll look for image 08. And then we're using those image 05 stars that we pulled off of the original image, and we'll call it shark, and we'll combine it. I would have done a lot of fine tuning to this one in Photoshop before bringing it back and adding it into. One of the big things that I did was really work on the areas that are issues. So I did the clone stamp in Pixinsight. This is not on that course that I talked about, so I do want to show you how to really clean this up. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm just going to turn it off. I'm going to duplicate this by hitting Command J. You can hit Control J on a Mac. Yeah, Command J on a Mac, Control J on a PC. I'm going to click this little patch guy over here. And let's go ahead and zoom in on this light leak we have. And I'm just going to draw an area around this. And I'm going to drag it to the area next to it. And so rather than a clone stamp, which will like immediately clone it, it's going to kind of use some intelligence and match it up so it looks nice and natural. And so you can just go around. Here's that other little light leak. And I don't have this in that Photoshop tutorial, but I do like this more than something like the remove tool. The remove tool, here, I'll just show you, can have a weird effect. So let me hover, remove tool. If I go after that, it will get rid of the blue, but watch the texture. So see how there's this, I'm gonna have to zoom in for you guys. See how there's this like weird crosshatch texture? We don't want that. So if I turn that off, you can see it does get rid of it, but there's kind of a weird texture. So I'm going to Command Z and undo that. I'm going to go back to the patch tool and get rid of that guy. You got to be really careful around any structure, and then like this guy is right on the edge, so you got to be careful because I mean, yes, are you perfectly accurate if you do this? No, but again, you got to pick your battles. This one's kind of a big old boy, but again, you can see how I did it before. So we'll get rid of this one. And then I have created a really kind of a cool preset. I'm thinking about doing a video on this, let me know. I've purposely made it overly strong, but I can just click this preset. And then it has all these different processes, all at different percentages. Like that's at 20, that one's at 100, that one's at 13. But what I can do is I can just take the whole preset and say that's a little too strong. And I purposely made it strong because you can always pull it back. I'm just going to go to the opacity and bring that back. So let's say like somewhere in there. This is going to enhance color, contrast. So there's the before, there's the after. I don't want too much. I have found that this has worked at some percentage. It's made it better on. So it depends on, if you like that dramatic look, some people might like that. But with every single image, this helps me at least save a little bit of time fine tuning. And so I'm just going to hit shift click, combine all those. And then I'm going to save this as Shark PPS for post Photoshop. So I didn't want to show you that tool to get rid of some of the issues. So what we'll do then is we'll go ahead, instead of this guy, we will open up that Photoshop version. Okay, and now we can go to script, utilities, screen stars, and instead of image 8, we'll do that PPS, and we'll call this like Shark F for Shark Final. And then if you don't have Photoshop to do the color work, which is where I would do more of the color work, because I do want to maybe bring out a little color, fine tune this a little bit. A nice way to do it is just go to process and go to curves, and this will just be the last thing that we do. So we'll go ahead and fine tune it in, where are we at? Come on, brain. Curves transformation. And the first thing we'll do is we'll grab the saturation and just bump that up a little bit, bringing out a little more of the blues, the oranges. All right, we'll apply that. And then we'll maybe do a little bit more. One thing I always look for is, you've been staring at this for a long time, and a lot of times, for some reason, I see this online when you guys post a lot, green is hiding in your image and you don't realize it. So I'm going to take this green slider and just pull it back a hair. See, before, after. Just kind of warms it up a little bit. If you go too far, it's going to be very magenta. But you can just kind of see this is where it was. Not bad. Just ever so slightly. I mean, it's literally about as small as you can move the mouse, before and after. Warmed it up just a little bit by pulling some of the green out. The opposite of green is magenta, so it's going to warm up the image a little bit. And then if I wanted to maybe add a little contrast, I could do an S-curve. I'm going to exaggerate the S-curve for those of you guys that don't know what an S-curve is, so you can see why we call it that. There's the high end of the S, there's the low end. So there you go, there's an S. It's obviously crazy. So we're just going to lift it up a hair, and then bring it down a hair. And now we have contrast, S-curve contrast. And we're gonna reset it. So there you go. There's kind of your final image. You can tweak, you know, I could sit here and tweak and fine tune this to my heart's content, but we've got some nice star color. So again, this is kind of what I got to. You can obviously tweak and tune whatever you like. I just really wanted to go through the workflow. Dark nebula can be tough. So hopefully that was helpful, guys. I haven't done a processing tutorial in a long time. Wanted to get one out for you. This is a tough style of target. You really do need dark skies to go after this. And if you don't have them, check out the Telescope Live and use the promo code to save 50% off. Till the next one, guys, clear skies.